In this documentary, we're diving into one of the most colossal and consequential battles of World War II, the Battle of Kursk. This was no ordinary clash of armies. It was the largest tank battle in history, a showdown that saw the Soviet and German war machines collide in a brutal test of strategy, technology, and sheer human will. By 1943, the Eastern Front had become a sprawling, blood-soaked battlefield stretching from the Arctic to the Black Sea. After their catastrophic defeat at Stalingrad, the German Wehrmacht was reeling. The once unstoppable Nazi war machine was beginning to falter, but Hitler wasn't ready to concede defeat. His generals convinced him that one last decisive offensive could turn the tide of the war in the east. The target? A massive bulge in the Soviet lines known as the Kursk salient, Operation Citadel. This was the code name for Hitler's grand plan to encircle and annihilate the Soviet forces at Kursk. The idea was to launch a pincer attack from the north and south, cutting off the salient and trapping the Red Army inside. Success at Kursk, the Germans believed, would restore their momentum and give them the upper hand on the Eastern Front. The Germans pulled out all the stops for this operation. They brought in some of their most fearsome weapons, hundreds of new Tiger and Panther tanks, along with the Elephant tank destroyers. These were the latest in German military technology, designed to dominate the battlefield with their heavy armor and powerful guns. The Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, was also poised to unleash its full might with waves of bombers and fighters ready to support the ground assault. But the Soviets were far from blind to these preparations. Thanks to their intelligence networks, including the infamous Lucy spy ring, Stalin and his generals knew the attack was coming. They had time to prepare, and prepare they did. The Soviets transformed the Kursk salient into one of the most heavily fortified regions in military history. Over 300,000 Soviet soldiers worked around the clock, constructing miles of trenches, laying nearly 1 million mines, and setting up countless anti-tank obstacles. Artillery and anti-tank guns were positioned in depth across the defensive lines, ready to unleash hell on the advancing Germans. This wasn't just a battlefield. It was a fortress designed to bleed the Wehrmacht dry. The Soviet strategy was simple but effective. Absorb the German attack, wear them down, and then counterattack. To execute this plan, the Soviets amassed a staggering force. Over 1.3 million men, 3,600 tanks, 20,000 artillery pieces, and 2,400 aircraft. This was a force designed not just to defend, but to destroy the Wehrmacht's offensive capability once and for all. Let's take a closer look at the technology that defined this battle. On the German side, you had the Tiger tank, an absolute beast of a machine. Weighing in at 54 tons, with 100 millimeters of frontal armor and an 88 millimeter gun, the Tiger was designed to dominate the battlefield. It could destroy enemy tanks from over a mile away, often before they could even get within effective range. Then there was the Panther, another formidable weapon in the German arsenal. The Panther was faster than the Tiger, with sloped armor that made it difficult to penetrate. It was meant to be the backbone of the German panzer divisions, combining firepower, mobility, and protection. But the Soviets had their own trump card, the T-34 tank. The T-34 wasn't just another tank, it was the symbol of Soviet resistance. Its sloped armor could deflect enemy shells more effectively, and it was faster and more maneuverable than its German counterparts. The T-34 was also easier to produce, meaning the Soviets could field them in massive numbers. At Kursk, this numerical superiority would play a crucial role. July 5, 1943, the day Operation Citadel began. At 4:30 a.m., the Germans unleashed a massive artillery barrage, followed by waves of Luftwaffe bombers. The earth shook as hundreds of German tanks and thousands of soldiers advanced towards the Soviet lines. In the north, Field Marshal Model's 9th Army attacked towards the city of Kursk, while in the south, Field Marshal Manstein's 4th Panzer Army struck towards Prokhorovka. The initial German advance was brutal. The Soviets had expected the attack, but the sheer power of the German assault was overwhelming. However, the Red Army was prepared for this. Their defenses were layered, with reserves positioned behind the front lines, ready to plug any gaps and counter any breakthroughs. The Soviets let the Germans advance, drawing them deeper into their defensive network. As the German tanks moved forward, they encountered minefields, anti-tank guns, and relentless artillery fire. The Germans paid a heavy price for every mile gained. Tanks were disabled or destroyed, soldiers were cut down by machine gun fire, and the advance began to slow. But the most intense moment of the Battle of Kursk came on July 12th at a place called Prokhorovka. This wasn't just a battle. It was the climax of the entire operation, the moment where everything hung in the balance. At Prokhorovka, the German SS Panzer Corps, with its elite tank divisions, clashed with the Soviet 5th Guards tank army. Over 1,200 tanks were involved in what would become one of the largest single-day tank battles in history. The combat was ferocious and chaotic, with tanks charging head-on at full speed, firing at point-blank range. The battlefield was a swirling mass of smoke, fire, and steel. Imagine the scene. Hundreds of tanks, some only a few meters apart, blasting each other with high-explosive shells. The noise was deafening, the dust and smoke so thick that visibility was reduced to almost nothing. In this maelstrom, the Germans found themselves outnumbered and outmaneuvered. The Soviet T-34s swarmed the German tanks, using their speed and numbers to overwhelm the more heavily armored Panthers and Tigers. Despite their technological superiority, the Germans couldn't break through at Prokhorovka. The Soviet defense was too strong, their determination too fierce. By the end of the day, the German advance had stalled. The battle at Prokhorovka marked the beginning of the end for Operation Citadel. The battlefield was a scene of utter devastation. Wrecked tanks, smoldering ruins, and countless bodies. But as the battle dragged on, it became clear that the Germans were running out of time and resources. Their losses were mounting. Their tanks were bogged down in the mud and debris, and their supply lines were stretched to the breaking point. Meanwhile, the Soviets, with their endless reserves, began to turn the tide. By August, the Soviets launched a massive counteroffensive. Their goal was not just to repel the Germans, but to shatter their forces and drive them back. The Red Army, bolstered by reinforcements and fueled by the desire for revenge, pushed the Germans into retreat. The Battle of Kursk was over, and the Soviets had won a decisive victory. The significance of the Battle of Kursk cannot be overstated. It was a turning point in World War II. For the first time, the Germans were decisively beaten in a major offensive on the Eastern Front. The victory at Kursk shattered the myth of German invincibility and marked the beginning of the Red Army's relentless advance toward Berlin. The German forces never fully recovered from the losses they sustained at Kursk. In the aftermath of Kursk, the Soviets launched a series of offensives that pushed the Germans out of Eastern Europe and set the stage for the final push into Germany itself. The victory at Kursk was a triumph of strategy, preparation, and sheer willpower. It was a battle that showed the world the resilience of the Soviet people and the determination of their leaders to defend their homeland at any cost. The Battle of Kursk was more than just the largest tank battle in history. It was a testament to the horrors of war and the incredible sacrifices made by millions. It's a story of courage, strategy, technology, and above all, of the human spirit in the face of overwhelming odds. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the Battle of Kursk, please watch other videos on this channel, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Let us know in the comments what other battles or events you'd like us to cover next. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep exploring the past to understand the present.